The snow under our boots crunched sharply as we trudged toward Station Polaris, the isolated Arctic research outpost where we were sent to investigate. The wind howled relentlessly, biting through our thermal suits and filling the air with a low, mournful wail that matched the stark emptiness of the frozen landscape. This wasn't the place for mistakes, but the station's sudden silence had dragged us here, hundreds of miles from anything resembling civilization. The research station, set up to collect data in the Arctic, had gone quiet, so we were sent to investigate. It could have been the result of the power going out, a problem with a communications array, or an encounter with wildlife. We had to prepare for anything. We set off equipped for a long mission, with supplies to last us days. The station loomed ahead, its angular structure almost blending into the stark white surroundings. Solar panels glinted dully under the weak Arctic sun, and the wind turbine blades creaked as they turned sluggishly. The comm tower stood tall, perfectly intact. From the outside, everything seemed functional, yet we all knew that no one had heard a word from the researchers in weeks. Inside, the facility was eerily pristine. The lights hummed softly, and the heaters were working perfectly. Supplies were neatly stacked in the pantry, and the living quarters were immaculate. It felt like the crew could walk in at any moment. But the air carried a stale weight, as though the building itself had been holding its breath. Then, we found them. Their bodies were huddled in the secure lab, the thick steel door latched from the inside. It took us a full hour to breach it, cutting through the locks with a plasma torch. When the door finally swung open, the scene was haunting. 4 researchers were slumped against the walls, their faces frozen in twisted expressions of fear. Their lab coats were rumpled and stained, and deep scratches marred the walls and door. A few words were scrawled on the inside of the door in what looked like dried blood. "Don't open." Their hands, raw and bloody, suggested desperate attempts to claw their way out, or maybe to keep something from getting in. The food stores were untouched, and the air recyclers were working perfectly. Yet the cause of death was clear: dehydration and starvation. They had locked themselves inside and never left. "Cabin fever," Eliza, a biologist, whispered, her voice trembling slightly despite her usual calm. Maybe they thought something was out there. "Maybe," I replied, glancing nervously toward the hallway. We fanned out, each of us taking a section of the station to begin our work. I focused on the comms array, which appeared functional but was inexplicably offline. The software log showed no errors, as if someone had deliberately disabled it. The station's pristine condition clashed violently with the madness of the locked lab. Every door swung on oiled hinges. Every panel was spotless under the fluorescent lights. Even the smallest tool sat in its proper place. The perfection of the setting only made it feel more unsettling. Then there was the feeling. It wasn't something we could measure or explain, but we all felt it. A subtle, pervasive wrongness. The air seemed heavier inside, charged with an energy that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Even the wind outside seemed muted, as though the station absorbed every sound. Something about the silence inside felt alive. I tried to focus on my tasks, but my mind kept circling back to the locked room, to those faces frozen in terror. What had they seen that drove them to such desperation? And what if it was still here? The first few hours at Station Polaris were chaotic, a frantic attempt to make sense of the fragmented research left behind. Environmental readings from the station sensors were erratic. Subtle rhythmic vibrations in the air were logged at precise intervals. These weren't seismic in nature. The station's ground-penetrating radar showed no signs of tectonic activity. Instead, it was as if the air itself pulsed with energy, but only fleetingly. Every time we tried to pinpoint the anomaly, The readings vanished as quickly as they appeared. "This doesn't make sense," Eliza said, poring over the data console, tapping the screen in mounting frustration. "It's like the equipment's playing tricks on us." "Could be interference from the storm outside," Mark offered, though his tone lacked conviction. He had already noticed the radio crackling with faint static, but he wasn't ready to alarm us with what that might mean. The strangeness escalated within hours. While conducting inventory in the common area, Eliza froze mid-step. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Mark asked. There was knocking from the other side of the main door. Mark walked to the door and shined his flashlight into the white expanse beyond the narrow window. Nothing but the swirling void of the Arctic night greeted him. "It's the wind," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. A few minutes later, I returned from inspecting the living quarters, pale and unsettled. "I swear I heard my name," I muttered. "It wasn't you two, was it?" "No," Eliza replied quickly, her eyes darting toward the flickering shadows under the fluorescent lights. "And I heard something else." Each of us reported hearing different sounds: muffled sobbing, distant tapping, voices murmuring indistinct words. None of us could verify what the others heard, and no auditory signals appeared on any monitoring equipment. The incongruity heightened the tension, as if the station itself were conspiring to disorient us. While searching the primary lab, I found a compartment hidden behind one of the equipment racks. Its lid was engraved with strange geometric patterns unfamiliar to any of us. Inside lay a crystalline object about the size of a grapefruit. It refracted light in unsettling ways, casting disoriented, shifting shadows on the walls. "What is this?" I murmured, reaching toward it. "Careful," Eliza warned, but curiosity got the better of me. The moment my fingertips grazed the object, a sharp jolt rippled through my hand. I pulled back, cursing. For a moment the room seemed to hum, and then fell silent again. "Did you feel that?" Mark asked, rubbing his temples. He described a faint whisper lingering in the back of his mind, like a half-forgotten memory trying to surface. Attempts to analyze the object proved fruitless. No material analysis equipment on site could identify its composition. It emitted no radiation, no heat signature. It was completely inert, yet profoundly wrong. "Whatever this is," Eliza said quietly, "it isn't supposed to be here." Later that evening, we gathered in the comms room to send an update to logistics. Mark activated the satellite relay and waited for the encryption sequence to complete. The screen displayed a reassuring green connection icon, which flickered and then went black. "Not now," he muttered, rebooting the system. Static hissed from the speakers, followed by the faint hum of a transmission. For a brief moment, the green icon reappeared, only to be replaced by garbled static and a faint rhythmic pulse. Mark adjusted the signal gain, but it was futile. "Is it the storm?" Eliza asked. Mark shook his head slowly. "We've transmitted through worse weather. This feels deliberate." By morning, the comm system had failed entirely. "We're on our own," I finally admitted. That night, the whispers became louder, more insistent. Eliza tried to sleep but jolted awake, saying she heard a voice, clear, commanding, whispering from inside her room, "Don't open the door." When she bolted upright, the room was empty. In the mess hall, Mark sat alone, staring at his radio. He swore the static was speaking to him, patterns emerging in the crackling noise. "Don't you hear it?" he asked. Before I could answer, the hallway lights flickered, casting jagged shadows across the walls. For a split second, we all felt it, a crushing presence, like something immense and unseen pressing down on the station. The sense of being watched became unbearable. None of us doubted the message scrawled on the lab door anymore. "Whatever's happening here, we can't stay," I said. "If we're not careful, we'll end up just like them." That night, the station woke us with sound. It began as faint scratching along the far wall, just loud enough to break the silence. Then came the banging, sharp, deliberate, like something heavy striking metal. We gathered in the common area, clutching whatever we could find. Eliza held a fire extinguisher. I gripped a wrench. Mark stood rigid, flashlight raised like a weapon. The noise moved, circling the station, from the walls to the roof to the floor. Each impact precise, deliberate, searching. "It's testing us," Eliza whispered. At dawn, the banging stopped, but the tension did not. We barricaded the doors and windows. Every logical part of me knew we were trapping ourselves inside, but the sounds had already made that choice for us. The second night was worse. Scraping claws dragged endlessly against the walls. Banging returned, harder now, chaotic, shaking the station to its core. "It's going to break through," Eliza whispered. Mark stared at the monitors. "There's nothing. Cameras show nothing." Then the banging answered his voice, louder, sharper, almost angry. We froze. "It heard that," Eliza said softly. By the third day, we were all running on fumes. Every movement felt heavier, every thought slower, as if the air itself was draining us. Eliza sat pale and shaking. "I can't think straight," she whispered. Mark rubbed his eyes. "It's like my energy's just gone." I didn't want to admit it, but I knew what I was thinking. "The artifact," I said. "It could be causing this." "Then throw it outside," Mark muttered. "And risk opening the station?" I replied. Before he could answer, the banging started again, now accompanied by a deep mechanical groan vibrating through the walls. That night, everything reached a fever pitch. The station shook violently. Scraping turned into a deafening screech. Eliza dropped to her knees, covering her ears. "It's in my head," she screamed. "It's in my head." Mark grabbed his flashlight and rushed toward the far hallway. "We can't just sit here and wait to die." The banging suddenly stopped. The silence was worse. Mark stood at the door, his hand hovering inches from the handle. "It's quiet," he whispered. "Don't open it," I shouted. The banging returned instantly, louder than ever, as if mocking us. We stumbled back into the common area. Then I noticed something strange. My coffee mug sat untouched on the table. The liquid inside was perfectly still, no ripples, no vibration. "Eliza, look at this." She didn't move. Mark shook his head. "The sound isn't real," I said. They stared at me. If something were actually hitting the station, everything would be vibrating. The vents, the tables, the water, but nothing is moving. Except us. The realization settled slowly. "The artifact," I continued quietly. "It's making us hear it, making us afraid, making us trap ourselves inside." "Then what?" Mark demanded. "You want to open the door?" "Yes." Mark stepped in front of the control panel. "Over my dead body." "I might be wrong," I admitted, "but if we stay here, we die anyway." I stepped forward. Mark grabbed my shoulder. I shoved him back and slammed my hand against the panel. The red light blinked once, twice, then turned green. The lock disengaged. The door opened. Nothing. No creature. No claw marks. No shadowy figures. Only the endless Arctic wind and the vast, empty white horizon. The sounds vanished instantly. "It's empty," I whispered. Mark stared, stunned. Eliza sank to her knees. "It was never outside," I said quietly. "It was always here." I looked back at the crystalline object resting in the lab. That thing wanted us afraid, wanted us locked inside, tearing each other apart. Evacuation arrived 2 days later. We packed what we could and buried the artifact somewhere even we couldn't find again. Mark never spoke much after that. Eliza transferred to another assignment far from the Arctic. And me? I stayed. Because sometimes, late at night, when the world goes quiet, I still remember the way the station sounded when nothing was actually there. And I wonder, if we had stayed just one more day, would we have opened that door at all?